So a little while back, I got a DM from one of my followers, and he asked me to get into the subject of the enabling that takes place within the Black community. Now, this is something that I've touched upon in a multitude of other videos, but I haven't made a specific video on in this sort of way. And the reason I felt that this was the best time is because I feel the most equipped and educated when it comes to the subject. Now, I recently finished off a book by Dr. Thomas Sowell. Shout out to the OG of all OGs, one of the most brilliant minds, as well as the bravest men within modern education. And the book is titled Black Rednecks and White Liberals. And close to the end of the book, he makes this reference to how within the Black community, like one of the biggest problems and perpetuators of the degenerate culture that is now known as Black culture, right? I want to make that very clear that Black culture has changed. It has morphed throughout American history. And it can even be kind of, divided into subcultures per se, where you had Southern Black American culture, then you had Northern Black American culture, or even like the Black New Englander culture versus this culture, that culture, right? It's giving this generalized sort of Black culture actually does more harm than good when it comes to the nuances of this conversation. Anyway, when it came to, let's say, many of the Blacks who were in the South who had adopted a lot of those Southern redneck tendencies that actually came from Old Britain, right? From a place called the Ulsters, the back alleyways. A lot of these degenerate sort of ways of living, ironically enough, actually came out of Europe, were adopted by Black folks, those who were in slavery and even some who were not, and they were perpetuated and carried forward, and these people adopted this as their culture, right? So again, that's of the utmost understanding. Right, because some people hear this and they just think, oh, see, here he go, shucking and jiving for the white man. Oh, he a sellout. Look at him talking about us Black folk again. No, we're going to make the difference here. As a matter of fact, that's why I do what I do, in part, is to differentiate between those who have adopted this toxic culture and those who are, quote unquote, divesting from it, as they like to say nowadays. So one of the biggest problems is that unlike in other cultures where they separated themselves, where they denounced and they shamed those who were projecting, who were behaving in a way that would look bad upon the rest of them. For example, when there was a massive Chinese migration into the United States and they started creating these small hubs known as Chinatowns, etc., because they needed the social approval and acceptance of, the broader society, they needed to make sure that they were on their P's and Q's, right? The way that they were moving. They needed tourism in order for these Chinatowns to thrive. And so they cleaned up their own streets to the point where the young men who are out there stealing, causing havoc, violence, things of that nature, were being taken care of either in the community to the point where they were finding bodies in the bayou, like there were bodies in the water of some of these criminals that were taken care of by their own community, or they would call, the white man, right? They would call the white police officers to come and beat these people's ass. They told them to bring the baton, bring the taser, damn it, bring the Glock. Because we're tired of these people. And so there was a concerted effort to rid themselves of the criminal element. Now, Black folks, or more specifically, those who are living in the more, urban areas, suburban areas, who are up north, etc., where a lot of Black folks went out to get work, post-slavery, or just to get out of, agricultural America, be a part of the revolution, the Industrial Revolution, etc. Many of these Black folks who were receiving the migrants didn't necessarily have, they didn't have the same sort of acceptance that we now see today. I think that's the best way I can put it. They didn't want them Negroes either. They thought that the way that we're living was foul, it was degenerate. And this was, fractals of what we're seeing today. We're talking about stick-up kids, right? We're talking about petty crimes. They saw that as distasteful. Those who were leeching onto government in order to make their way. They saw that as distasteful. However, there was not enough of a push, of a backlash, but instead there was this push towards racial unity. We will stick together on the basis of our race. Now, again, you and I have been told a multitude of times that, well, this was a necessity because racism was so rampant and, black people were targeted on the sake of blackness. And to that, I say, why was there more thriving happening decades before 1965 than there was after the fact? Why were there more black people lifted out of poverty? A almost 50% cut, a halving, what's the word? There was half the people living in poverty, and it happened as a byproduct of education, a prioritization of education, not watered down education, not affirmative action, DEI education, but a hard-nosed education with high standards. And you had schools such as Dunbar High School where black students were doing better than the national average, better than white students at the same level. Now, again, this is going to make the real racists real mad, right? The real white supremacists out there, this is going to piss them off. They want to ride on the coattail of that. Well, IQ is definitely, most precisely, it's genetic and nothing else. It's Aryan to be high in your IQ while they dumb as a bag of damn rocks. Turns out that the research says something a little different. It says that when you have higher standards for your people, they meet those standards. They're forced to meet those standards. When you create incentives for education as opposed to degradation, that's where people lean towards. When you start to infantilize people, treat them as if they are these victims and can do nothing for themselves, then that's what you get. Now, we have black folks who were enslaved in the Caribbeans, many of which would find their way into the United States and outperform many of the black folks here. Some would say, well, they didn't have the same type of slavery. They didn't go through what we went through. No, they went through likely the same, if not worse. Heard of Willie Lynch. I was a man in the Caribbeans, right? So why did they thrive? Why did they not have the same level of degradation that started to take place throughout the years and the decades? It's because they were making different choices. They were choosing to prioritize education, productivity, entrepreneurship, and continuing to carry those as staples for their community. How did we get to the point that we are now? It comes back to that question that I was asked in my DMs by one of my peoples out there. Enabling of bad behavior. We could have kept this as a subculture, as something over there that we don't accept, right? It's like, you go back in the day, there were H houses, there were brothels, etc., but they were on the outskirts of town. You had to go to a far distant place. You were shunned if you were one who was to go there. Now it's praised, it's worshiped, it's glorified. Girls coming out of high school looking to become digital 304s, digital streetwalkers. Before they think about, I want to start a family or, I want to go to school and get an education, I want to bust it wide open for strangers. That's a cultural issue. That's a standards issue. And when that is promoted instead of being shamed, we get what we have gotten within the quote unquote black community. And it is happening at scale. In the African diaspora, as well as back home in, continental, colonized and uncolonized, sovereign Africa. We have much of the same temperament, and it all stems to the perpetuation of the victimhood narrative. When you push the narrative of I am a victim, you are a victim, you are able to get away with damn near anything, right? When you feel bad for somebody because they got a bad hand, they were slighted. Oh man, but you don't know what they went through. Oh man, but they were raising X, Y, and Z. You know what? Let's let them get away with that. I know they're committing crimes, but you know what? They went through some things. Right? I know they got 13 bodies, but just think about what they've been through. Now, it's interesting how this narrative is only acceptable to specific groups of people, right? More specifically, colored people. And that's by design. That is the white liberal who has continuously perpetuated that narrative. But I'm not going to put all the onus on them, right? They're just perpetuating it in the same way black folks have allowed for it to happen in-house. And unfortunately, there are many voices, many than would likely articulate themselves, who feel the very same way. If not, they feel more grieved about it. They hate it even more so. When I moved into a small town, everybody was all smiles except for the few black folks I ran into looked at me with a skeptical eye, like, who are you and why are you here? Oh man, they're a sellout. No, they're sick and tired of what they were raised around. They're sick and tired of the people who are being egged on in their terrible behavior. They're tired of the enabling aspect of the community that has allowed for the dangerous, sinister, villainous, demonic individuals to be the ones that are pushed forward. And they get away with what they get away with. And it becomes mainstream. We should never get that twisted. And I know Brother Dr. Thomas Sowell refers to this as the subculture. To hell with the subculture. It is no longer a subculture. It is the mainstream culture. Does it mean that everybody's out there robbing and jagging and stealing and killing? No. But it means that it is the predominating culture. When somebody says you're acting black versus, man, you acting white, what does that look like in your head and why? Back in the day, if said, man, you acting black, it might have meant something very different. Oh, you're going to work hard. You're going to do what's necessary to, you're going to be a victor, not a victim. You're going to thrive over survive. You're going to make it happen. But now the things that ruminate in our heads are, oh, you probably going to steal, probably going to take somebody's life, act a damn fool in public, start a fight when people are just trying to have a good time. These are the things that are connotated, and it's nobody else's fault. It's nobody else's fault if I, a black man, continue to allow that behavior to perpetuate. I'm so afraid of being called a sellout that I'm not willing to call somebody out on their terrible behavior. We can do so much better, but we have to raise the standards. We have to raise the bar. Don't look for somebody to lower the bar so you can jump over it. Raise the damn bar so you can learn how to jump higher. I hope you didn't take that as a literal thing. I'm not saying that we need to make more athletes for the sake of athletes. In every walk of life, how do we build the things that have been built by much of Western civilization, which we should be using as the ultimate blueprint in the same way the Japanese did? The backwards, destitute Japanese people who turned themselves around are now a superpower technologically. How do they do it? They looked to the Western world. They looked to America and they were inspired. They stopped idolizing foolishness and they started uplifting the likes of an Abraham Lincoln. Imagine that. Didn't need somebody to look like them in order to see them as an example of what they could do and what they could be. They looked to Benjamin Franklin and said, wow, we can do so much better. They looked to Henry Ford. Wow, my goodness, we can do so much better. And now look at them winning, trying to keep y'all asses out of there. All people have been through something, and I'm not going to belittle that. Okay, maybe back in the day, I might have come off as, oh, you don't really care. Well, you pretend like it never happened 400 years. I'm not going to pretend like it didn't. But guess what? Guess what? Everybody has been through something. Everybody is going through something to some extent. Now, you speak of slavery, but you never were one. But you know who was? Your ancestors, my ancestors, their ancestors. The white man, the Asian man, the Arab, the Jew. Their ancestors were slaves too. Their ancestors were discriminated against too. Their ancestors had the short end of the stick too. Oh, well, it wasn't as bad as I. Why was your pain worse than another human being's pain? It was all terrible. It's all a stain upon human history. All of it was unfortunate. It all happened, and we can't change what happened. But there are those who made a decision to rise above and to continue to do so. And the opportunity is all they needed. Boy, the day that I'm free. Boy, the day that I am free, I'm about to. And you know how many folks did exactly that? Only for 200, 150 years later, 90, 80, 70 years later for us to be here crying and complaining and whining about spilt milk, about a past that we never experienced, perpetuating victimhood. And when people are acting out, we cover up for them as opposed to keeping them accountable. That's the problem. No, I'm there. I'm there now. There's many things in this life I don't know. Every day I'm learning the things I don't know, right? I just started this biography. Thick as hell right here. Thick as oatmeal of Winston Churchill. And I thought I knew something about World War II. I thought I knew something about, Winston himself or the times in which he was raised in. I didn't know a damn thing. I know what I don't know now. But when it comes to this is something I know. This is something I know personally, intimately. And so that's why I speak on it boldly, because I know that anybody who wants to, speak on these subjects, you can tell me about 400 years, 200 years. You can tell me about Jim Crow. You can tell me about the rest of it. And I got the facts for your ass. I got the facts for you. Why is there evidence of black people in the midst of slavery, attending university, prioritizing education, schools in the South transformed into hubs of educational excellence, black folks outperforming every damn body? And now we're asking for some damn DEI. Come on, man. Come on. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you'd like to stay around, make sure to click that little subscribe button down there. Or you can show some love by going to the description below and clicking on the button titled Buy Me a Coffee. Leave a little something there, or click on the Cash App. Leave a little something here. Till the next time, peace. Aquarius. Where? I've been up for hours, I've been up for days, you. Staring at the ceiling, I've been counting strays, you. I've been in my feelings, I've been out of mind. I've been getting visions of the other kind. I've been up for weeks. I'm in the counting blessings over counting sheep. I can never be the type to limit when it comes to me. I used to be the pleaser for the people.